You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you SPKEX volatility products. SPKEX options and futures are traded on the SPKEX Volatility Index, SPKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about SPKEX at miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever exciting, ever compelling Options Insider Radio Network. Of course, if you want to hear more than what we have today, if you don't want your broadcast week to end at the end of Volatility Views, we know what to go, listeners. theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. And of course, what do you get there? Of course, you get Options Oddities coming up a little bit later today. We got some fun trades in the hopper and a whole bunch of other good stuff popping off. That should be fun to break down a little bit after today's show. Pro Q&A, we had Scott Nations last week breaking down all things in the NASDAQ vol realm. We had Jim Carroll, frequent guest of the program, on Vol Views. He was in the hot seat this week as well. So we had a lot of vol talk over the last couple of weeks. So if you like vol questions and vol talk, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to get even more beyond Volatility Views. Of course, you get giveaways live, all sorts of fun stuff. theoptionsinsider.com/pro, the place to go. And let's see who's joining us on the old program today. First, let's go out to the Southern Volatility Mecca, known as Austin, where we are joined once again by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball, welcome back to the program, sir.
Hey, it's good to be here. Interesting day today, don't you think?
Yeah. Powell once again pulling out the old spookage on the old markets. We'll get to all of that fun in a little bit, listeners. And also joining us today on the old MIAX hot seat today, I'm pleased to welcome back Mr. Matt McFarland, the derivatives, products, and business development specialist over there for MIAX Futures. Mr. Matt, welcome back to the hot seat, sir.
Hey, Mark. Thank you. Glad to be here and looking forward to talking about volatility with you this afternoon.
All right. Should be a fun one. Let's get to it. It is time for the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Volatility Review, the portion of the show where we break down the week that was and indeed still is some of vol trading and trending and analysis and unusual activity perspective. And as Meatball alluded to, we're seeing a wee bit, or okay, maybe a lot of red on the screens when we're kicking off the show here, listeners. Again, Powell and his ilk meeting over there in Jackson Hole, and they usually tend to spook the markets. That seems to be what's happening today. Most of the major indices firmly in the red. The S&P off a little over 2%, about 2.1%. NASDAQ off about 2.5%, and the Dow closing in on 2%, about 1.8%. Even though it does seem like we are maybe bouncing a little bit now, we shall see. We shall see how all that unfolds as the show progresses. All this means our vol friends getting a little bit firmer here this week. Spikes, when we kicked off the show, is at about a 24 even, puts it up about 3.25 points from this time last week. VIX cash also at about a 24 even, up about 3.5 points from where it was this time last week. VVIX at about an 88, down 2 points from where we were this time last week. So still staying frothy, still threatening to break into that 90 handle again. And speaking of vol, the Viking, aka V-Spikes, north of 100 now, 100.5. It's actually down a little bit from where it was this time last show. All right, with all that vol and all that vol table setting done, let's go around the horn. Let's go out to the MIAX hot seat because a lot of action in his neck of the woods these days. Mr. Matt, what is lighting up your tape in the vol space today, sir?
Yeah, Mark, this week the market was entirely focused on Powell's speech this morning. And given that, I was surprised at how low vol was heading into the speech. We look at the Spikes index last week on Thursday, Spikes closed below 20. It was the first time it closed below 20 since April, and only the 12th time it's closed below 20 for the entire calendar year of 2022. So exceptionally low volatility heading into this, important speech from Powell today. And not only was volatility itself low, but if you look at the Spikes futures term structure, that was quite steep in front of such a important moment for the market. The Spikes futures term structure, as measured by the difference between the October future and the September future, closed yesterday at 185. That's pretty steep. And when you think about the term structure, a steep term structure really indicates market complacency, as it indicates that the market is more concerned about higher volatility further out in time than in the immediate future. So I thought that's quite a steep term structure in the face of a Fed speech. And of course, Powell spoke this morning and was quite hawkish, which really wasn't that much of a surprise. But now you're starting to see some flattening of the term structure. That spread between September and October is now down to about 130. And of course, Spikes is creeping higher, around 24. The mean for the year of the Spikes index is at 26. And we tend to think about mean reversion mainly after a volatility spike. But we also have mean reversion after a period of low volatility. And that's what we've experienced over the past couple of weeks is relatively low volatility. And now you're starting to see a reversion to the mean, which is right around 26.
All right, Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. What is lighting up your tape on a day when we are looking red and the vol screen is looking green?
Yeah, vol's up, but it's not like it's blowing higher. I was kind of pre-prepped for this, and it was already, and VIX and Spikes had already rallied over 20, and now they're, kind of holding place. I'll be interested to see whether we get follow through on Monday. That's going to be, I think, where we have the ability to see vol really really move higher is if there's follow through. Right now, like I said, we're down 90 points. VIX is 2360. Spikes is, somewhere close to that as well. I'll tell you where Spikes is. The Spike index is what? 2393. Yeah, right there. And so, we're going to need a significantly down to get a real vol pop. But I think that could come on Monday if markets continue their selling. And it's entirely possible they do.
Yes, when Powell speaks, markets usually like to trend lower for a little bit, and we're seeing that right now. Will be interesting to see if it continues through the rest of the day and, of course, into next week. It's usually that second leg of selling, coming off of the weekend, and if we sell again, that's what tends to spook people. That would maybe be what would kick our vol into higher gear. But I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves for the crystal ball. That's coming down the road a little bit. Let's get out to the vol surface. Matt, you were just talking about this kind of interesting setup that we have out there in the vol futures. Coming into the start of the show out there in the VIX futures land, we had that front portion of the curve looking a little bit juicier, a little bit frothier. Again, like you mentioned, Mark, nothing blowing your doors off here, but a little bit more juice on the screen. We had SEP future up almost 0.75 of a point, about 0.7, and the OCC future up about 0.5 point. So getting a little bit of juice back in that front portion of the curve, but not a ton. More like a basting rather than a full injection of juice out there in the front. I guess I'm hungry for turkey today or something. I don't know. And then heading out to the rest of the curve, we are still seeing that little bit of extra juice going out into the end of the year and beyond. Matt, you were just talking earlier about the vol surface you're seeing in the spikes futures. This has been a talking point we've been talking about on the show for the better part of the last month, the kind of aggressive contango, the aggressive bid we're seeing a little bit farther out in the term structure. You mentioned they're kind of coming for that a little bit today. What's catching your eye out there in the vol surface? And also, when you're not talking to us, you're obviously spending your days out there working behind the scenes on the spikes futures front. Any new updates or developments there you can share with us, sir?
Yeah, as I said, it's certainly a bit surprising that there's not a better bid to the front portion of the term structure, given the hawkishness of Powell's comments this morning. Although we're seeing a little bit of a better bid today relative to earlier this week, but would expect that to firm up quite a bit. But spikes futures in general going fantastically. We're having our best month ever, or best month in 2022. We're averaging over 6,000 contracts per day. And not only is our volume pretty strong, our market quality is improving as well. And both volume and market quality are improving because there's more market participants in our market. In terms of market quality, one key metric that we look at quite closely is the percentage of time that the spikes futures are one tick wide on the front contract and the second contract. In August, we're seeing that to be 86% of the time. In July, that was 61%. So that's a pretty significant improvement. And we also look at the average size that is displayed on the bid and the offer. In July, that was 110 contracts. We're up to 126 contracts. We also look at what percent of our volume is compared to the incumbent product. And this month we're running at about 3.5% versus about 1% last month. So while we're having, our best month of the year, the incumbent product is having arguably its worst month of the year, which I think is revealing. Not only are we having strong volume and strong market quality, but if you look at, we're starting to see some action in the calendar spread markets. We're starting to see some quotes out in the long dates. We're seeing quotes out in the Jan and Fed futures. So these are all signs of a developing and maturing market. So going really well. And of course, the launch of the convexity shares ETFs last week is helpful for the spikes futures market as well.
Yes, I'm looking forward to getting into those a little bit more as we get into some of the SPKX ETPs, the ever-growing universe, listeners, of volatility and SPKX ETPs. Always fun to have new ones to chat about here on the show. Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. The vol surface, the term structure, has been a frequent talking point here on the show for the better part of the last month. What is catching your eye out there this week, sir?
Yeah, that back end just doesn't want to quit. Continues to be really high. With the move higher in VIX, we've seen the curve kind of look it looks pretty normal from September to December, but then you get that big jump, and January, Feb, March, they're all on top of each other. And with VIX futures way out there, still up at 28, it has to make you wonder. And then, October, November, December, both near 27, has to make you wonder what the market is looking for, because they do not trust this low VIX right now.
Let's see what they trust out here in the land of vol options. Let's get through to SPKX. We talked about that really funky in the money put spread and SPKX options. That's still probably one of my favorite vol trades of the year. You just don't see deep in the money puts going up like that, let alone for any decent size. So that was certainly a fun one that resonated with me. This week, we're still seeing pretty much the similar paper to what we saw out there last week. Let's look at the top 5 positions in SPKX options right now. Number 5, we have the SEP 50s. Number 4, we have the SEP 12 half calls. Number 3, here we go, listeners. We have a tie for 3 and 2. It's the OC 140 180 puts. That part of that put spread, stupid, whatever the hell that was. Still one of my favorite trades of the year. And then number 1 position out there in SPKX options, the SEP 28 calls. Matt, did you happen to see this funky OC 140 180 put spread going up last week? And if so, do you have any thoughts on that? Anything else catching your eye in the world of SPKX options these days, sir?
I did see that. It without a doubt caught my eye. 140, 180 puts. I wish I had some insight to share with you. I share your confusion and perplexion on that one. It's odd, but I think the most important thing in terms of SPKX options that I'd like to share with you and the listeners is there was an announcement earlier this month that Webull is making SPKX options available to their customers. And as a result of that, we've started to see some small retail like order flow into the SPKX options market. Now, the volume has been light, but the number of trades have been quite high. And we've been evaluating the execution quality of those trades, specifically looking at and asking ourselves, what if this trade would have been executed, same strike, same expiration against the, in the incumbent product? Would they have received a better execution price, the same execution price, or a worse execution price? And what we've determined, and trying to be as objective as possible, is that most of the time, the vast majority of the time, these clients are receiving execution prices that are equal to or better than what one would reasonably expect to receive against the incumbent product. So it's great to see this customer flow coming into SPKX options. Great to see these customers having a good experience with SPKX options. And of course, they're getting essentially the same exposure without, exceptionally high exchange fees.
We had a listener point that out this week, Scott Sommer over there on our YouTube channel, saying Webull announcing they are supporting SPKX options this week. So he was excited about it. Obviously, our listeners are picking it up as well there, Matt. So that's good to hear that you're starting to see more retail flow out there, because we love the big 10,000 plus lots. That's always fun. We like to break that down here on the show, but it's always good to have a nice 10 and 20 lot ecosystem as well. It's so good to see that's growing. Speaking of ecosystems, let's get out to the VIX options ecosystem. It looks a little bit smaller this week than it did last week, but I think that could be because of a glitch in some of the data. Coming into today's show, it looks like it's showing a ADV of 372,000 contracts, which says that SPKX VIX options has fallen off a cliff from an ADV perspective of 53,000 contracts. I don't think that's the case, though. I think looks like looking into that a little bit, it seems like there was a bit of a hiccup with the data because it is showing 0 contracts trading for Thursday. So that'll give you a hit to the ADV. I think the actual number is around 418,000 or so. So it's down slightly on the week, but again, I don't think it is down a precipitous 53,000. I've been saying for a while it's going to threaten the 400K handle in the wrong direction. I don't quite think we are there yet. Let's get to the top 10 size positions out here. What are the big positions in VIX options? Let's find out together, listeners. Cost you 152,000 contracts to break into the top 10 in VIX this week. That gets you to the SEP 30s. And you know it has to be near the bottom of the list because it's probably the most reasonable call strike we have on the list this week. So once again, right at the bottom, $1.52. Number 9, also $1.52 of the SEP 75. So there we go, right back at it. Number 8, 159,000 of the NOV 80s. Number 7, $1.61 of the SEP 50s. Number 5, 168,000 of the OC 50s. Then we have our put strip. By the way, there are 2 puts, so it's 8-2 calls over puts in the top 10 this week, listeners. Number 5, we have 176,000 of the SEP 22 puts. Number 4, 190,000 of the OC 20 puts. Then we're back at it again, listeners. Number 3, 200,000 exactly of the March 75s. Number 2, 204,000 of the OC 75s. And number 1, 230,000 of the NOV 70s on the tape. In terms of today, we're starting to see a little bit more paper on the tape. It's interesting because, you know, as Mark alluded to earlier, we're not seeing an enormous pop in vol. We're seeing kind of a nice inhale on the vol front. We're also not seeing a big pop on the vol options front. It's really kind of a light day. Just ticked to 200,000 contracts as we're speaking, pretty much, listeners. So a pretty light day out there in VIX options. And the big dog today, interestingly enough, 65,000 of the SEP 20 puts. So these are not even in our top 10. So maybe someone piling into more SEP 20 puts or getting the heck out of Dodge thinking we're going to be hanging out back above 20 for a while. That's pretty much the big dog today. That's pretty much it. Beyond that, you fall off a cliff to number 2, listeners, 10,000 of the D's 35s, and then it gets kind of smaller from there. It's not a lot of paper on the tape, really, outside of the SEP 20 puts. Let's just look really quickly to see what they're up to in those SEP 20 puts really quickly. Looks like, man, we got big blocks going up 19,000, 30,000 for, looks like they're buying these for the most part, 17.5 cents. So some of those split in the uprights there, but yeah, looks like they paid 27 cents, 17 cents, and 17.5 cents for big blocks of those puts here. And let's go out here. Obviously, Thursday showing no volume, which is obviously not correct. I did manage to do a little dig right before showtime, listeners. Did see some of the bigger prints yesterday. So there were prints yesterday. VIX was not closed yesterday. Looks like there was a funky 4-way going up yesterday. It was the Jan 50-75 against the SEP 30-40. 2 call verticals going up about 10,000 times each. Looks like they were buying the Jan vertical and selling the SEP vertical. It's hard to tell. There's OI on both strikes, so it's hard to tell if only 10,000 listeners, if it's opening or closing on these just yet. But intriguing to see that if they are rolling, that would be an interesting roll from the 30-40 to the 50-75. We have seen weirder things. Witness that funky spikes put spread last week. That gets the award for the most weird. But still, a lot of weird paper out there on the tape. And then we've got out to Wednesday, another pretty light day, which is why the ADV has been trending down, listeners. 185,000 contracts on the tape, 16,600 of the SEP 22 puts. Number 2, 12,000 of the SEP 28 calls. Number 3, 10,000 of the SEP 20 puts. Number 4, 10,000 as well of the D's 21 puts. And rounding out the top 5 on Wednesday, 10,000 as well of the OC 75s going up again. So we have, once again, listeners, we have the fun paper going up to the upside there. Tuesday, again, pretty light day as well. 159,000 contracts on the tape. The big dog on Tuesday, 43,000 of the D75 calls, followed by 8,000 of the SEP 30s, 7,500 of the D's 35s, 5,400 of the SEP 22 puts, and rounding out the top 5 on another anemic day, 4,000. Only cost you 4,000 contracts to break into the top 5 on Tuesday, listeners. That gets you to the no 42 halves. Monday, such as it was, the most active day of the week, 437,000 contracts. That's barely the ADV, but that's enough to take the crown, at least so far this week. The big dog on Monday, 36,000 of the SEP 22 puts. Number 2, 18,000 of the SEP 32 halves. Number 3, 18,000 as well of the SEP 40s, maybe a bit of a roll going up out there. Number 4, we have the SEP 21 puts, so maybe a bit of a vertical finance by puts, all going up in similar volume. And then number 5 on Monday, we have 17, almost 18,000 of the SEP 30s. Mr. Meatball, sir, kind of a weird week. Not the most active week out there, I think, to put it mildly, but a few interesting pockets of paper out here this week. What caught your eye in VIX options? And did you happen to notice this funky Jan 50, 75, SEP 30, 40 four-way that went up yesterday, sir?
Yeah, that was an interesting one, wasn't it? Do
you know if they were rolling or they're just putting that on straight up?
They were rolling. That's
a funky roll from the 30, 40 to the 50, 75.
Yeah. What I would say is leading into Jackson Hole, we saw a pretty heavy put trading. And I would say that my favorite trade of the week was a trader came in 10 by 20 and bought the December 25 puts for $2.95 and sold the 21 puts at 97 cents. They did that 10 by 20. Really interesting play, taking advantage, looking to kind of ride the curve lower. Wednesday was definitely the busy day for the market. We also saw a big March call spread buyer on Wednesday. I don't know if you saw the March 45.75 go up, but that one was busy. So it was it was an interesting day for sure.
1 by 2 to the downside in VIX options. You don't see that too often.
I really like it. You're basically saying we think the VIX is going to hang around 2021 between now and December. And during that time, the curve is going to have to, December is going to have to start converging toward volatility. And this trade that I'm spending, $1 on could turn into $3. That is the methodology behind that trade. I like the setup and essentially kind of did something very similar to that within my own trading. I did the December, what did I do? I did the 24. I will tell you in 1 second exactly what I did. I bought the 24-20-16 for like $1.15, and it's a butterfly, and I like the way that spread set up.
Yeah, I don't hate either. I don't hate the 1 by 2 either. It's just interesting to see those going up for size. We don't see those too often. People always ask us about funky ratio spreads. They're talking about the traditional 1 by 2 to the call side that we see or used to see a lot in VIX. Not so much anymore these days. Selling 1, buying 2. We don't see the buying 1, selling 2 to the upside too often for obvious reasons. And we don't see it to the downside very often either. So seeing it that way is kind of interesting. You like that, listeners? You like that? What was it? Dees 25-21, 1 by 2 put spread, listeners? Buying 1, selling 2? It's intriguing. Hit us up. Let us know. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that. It does seem like it's a time once again for ratio spreads. They're starting to crop up again on our screens. Just wait for options oddities. We got a few for you a little bit later today. Let's see what else is going on out here this week. Let's get out to the land of the newly minted SPKX ETPs, Mr. Matt, because, of course, we had our buddy Simon on the show last week to announce, indeed, to herald the launch of the much-anticipated SPKX ETPs. Of course, we have SPKX, so just SPKX, which is kind of, I won't say your vanilla, but your straightforward, no leverage ETF. Then, of course, we have Spiky, SPKY, our new favorite here, which is the 1.5 levered product out there. Mr. Matt, we haven't had a chance to gauge your thoughts on the launch in the early days of these products. So what are your thoughts here now that we're a week and change into SPKX and Spiky?
We're just thrilled with the way things are going for the convexity shares ETFs. Yeah, so you have SPKX 1 times long, SPKY 1.5 times long, launched on August 16th. The SPKX currently holding about 105 Spikes futures contracts. And of course, there's holding front month Spikes futures contracts and second month Spikes futures contracts. And SPKY is holding about 160 Spikes futures contracts. So helpful to the Spikes futures open interest. I'm getting this data from the Convexity Shares website, which is convexityshares.com. If anybody wants to be updated with what's going on with Convexity Shares, you go to convexityshares.com, scroll to the bottom, click on a button to get on the email distribution list. But we're thrilled with the way things are going. Flow Traders is the lead market maker. They're one of the premier ETF, volatility ETF market makers. They're doing a fantastic job on the shares. We see a 2-cent wide market on the shares pretty much throughout the entire trading day. For a brand new ETF, we think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think that this week was an absolutely perfect use case for Convexity Shares ETFs and long volatility ETPs in general. You think about, we had a period of relatively low volatility. You've got an important market event on the horizon in Chairman Powell speaking in Jackson Hole. Perfect type of scenario for these types of products, and that's why Convexity Shares brought them out, to give market participants alternatives and choice in their hedging instruments.
Yeah, they seem to be attracting some attention, listeners. So if you haven't checked them out yet, SPKX for the non-levered product, and then SPKY, aka Spiky, as it will be known forevermore on this program, listeners, is the 1.5 levered product. And you're right, I'm just checking out some of the volume. So they are picking up some numbers. They have some ADV out there. So worth checking out. Again, Convexity Shares, CONVEXITY shares.com is the place to go to learn more. Mr. Meatball, have you had a chance to sling a one lot yet in SPKX or Spiky yet?
No, but maybe I'll do it right now. What is SPKX is the long.
Yeah, and then there's Spiky is the 1.5 time, SPKY.
SPKY. Wow. They're having a nice day, up 10%. I like the nice wide markets. Looking at the stats on Spiky, it's done a few shares, and SPKX, it's done a little. Yeah, you know what? Let's go crazy. I'm gonna buy one share right now.
Bam! There it goes, listeners.
Look at me. Look at me.
Slinging size. A journey of 1,000 steps begins with one. There we go. All right, so there you go. One share. Get your one lot, listeners. Of Spiky. I'll put one on too, just for fun. Spiky, of course, the one that I'm gravitated to. But hey, to each their own, listeners. If you like the non-levered product, have at it out there. Let's get on out to the land of some of the other inverse and regular ETPs out there. Let's start on the inverse side of the fence. SVIX, our inverse friend, was at about a 13 when we kicked off the show. That puts it down 0.5 point. Obviously, it's an inverse product, listener, so it's going to be down a little bit when vol is getting a little bit firmer. This is a product we have talked about a lot. It hasn't really lived up to the hype yet from an overall volume perspective. The ADV is a whopping 598 right now. And today's volume is a whopping 607 contracts. By the way, it has dipped a bit since the start of our show. It is now down to about 1275. So that puts it down about 0.75 point on the week. In terms of, let's just do a quick top two, because that's all that's open for size. We have the SEP 13s, about 775 of those, and then the March 8 puts for 716 of those. Those are the two top positions in good old SVIX right now. Let's get on out to its counterpart out there, which is, of course, UVIX, a product that doesn't seem to be having a hard time ginning up some paper. In fact, it's already off to the races again today. 10,000 contracts on the tape. It seems like whenever we do a show here, this UVIX steps up to the plate, because the ADV is still only 4,400. It's up about 100 contracts on the week. But last week on the show, we did 12,000 contracts. Today, it's doing 10,000. So you must know we're watching it, listeners. It decides to get active when we're watching it out there. let's see if we can find what's going up out there today. But first, before we do that, let's break down a top 5 from the positions out there. Number 5, we have the SEP8s, about 2,000 of those. Number 4, we have 2,000 as well of the DS18 puts. So we're kind of all over the place already, which is interesting. Number 3, 2,800 of the SEP8 puts. Number 4, 4,100 of the SEP12s. And 4,200 for number 1 of the SEP10 puts. So similar OI, maybe a bit of a funky risk reversal or collar out there, or it could be unrelated paper, but intriguing stuff nonetheless. In terms of the action today, it's the SEP12s going up for size about 2,500 times today. It seems like that's driving a lot of the paper. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on in these bad boys. Looks like paper picking up some of these for 60 cents and then 55 cents. So buying some more SEP12s to perhaps close out or perhaps pile in. Intriguing stuff nonetheless. Yeah, 2,500 of those already trading today. And then 1,100 of the AUG expiring today. 10.5 calls out there. Mr. Meatball, have you or any of your crazies in the pitch chat slung any SVIX or UVIX this week, sir?
UVIX for sure. That is a really interesting thing to trade. The markets are relatively pretty tight. Today, the action is on the 10.5 calls. They're buying the 10.5 for like a nickel, looking for a potential real end-of-day pop. And then we do have some action in next week's options as well. The busiest option of the day is the September 12 calls. Almost 2,500 of those have traded. So keep an eye. Again, if it's not today that's going to cause vol to spike, it is, you want to see the spike.
Yeah, that's going to be, like we were saying earlier, that's going to be if we see the sell-off continue into Monday. The second leg is always what spooks people. We've seen that before. And if it plays out again that way, we will see some firming of the vol, let's just say, out there next week. Let's get on out some of the other big vol ETPs. VXX, for what it's worth these days, about 2020 when we kicked off the show, down about a little over 1.1 points out there. The ADV continues to erode. 55,000 contracts on the tape, down another 15,000 this week, even though we were at about 58,000 today. So it seems like that's going to be holding firm this week. Top positions out there in VXX, not much to speak of. Obviously, the previous size position, the AUG 16 puts, have now gone the way of the dodo. Good thing Mark and I didn't hazard. I think they were a whopping nickel when we were talking about them a month ago, or a month and change ago. I don't think either of us ever took that flyer. Good thing. We would have wasted a nickel however many times we would have done it. In terms of action today, what's going up in VXX today? Looks like almost 12,000 of the AUG 20 halves expiring today. That's the big dog. Everything else is kind of like 4,300 of the AUG 20s. All AUG expiring today, listeners. 4,200 of the AUG 20 half puts. So about what you would expect. Let's get on out to another one we've kind of been speculating about a lot of late. And that is, of course, our old friend, UVXY. It likes to erode. It was about 9 3/4 when we kicked off the show. That puts it up about exactly a point. As we're looking at it right now, it's at about a 10. So it's actually up 1 1/4 on the week. And the 10 handle, that's where we were talking about for a while. When it gets below the 10 handles, where we start talking reverse split. But I also pontificated on the show last week, listening. I said, what if the market will reverse split for them? Which is why maybe we haven't heard much about it. And here we go, right back to the 10 handle now, listeners. Can we hang up out here for a while? That's the big question. Because if it has its druthers, UVXY wants to go to 0 in a heartbeat. So we shall see how long we can hang out at the 10 handle, or dare I say it, above. In terms of action, the ADV, 240,000 contracts. Again, that's showing down 44,000. But again, I think we had some data glitches on Thursday, so maybe take that ADV change with a bit of a grain of salt. In terms of today's paper, 332,000 contracts on the tape today. So things are trading in UVXY today, listeners. Let's get out to the top 10 out there today, and then we'll break down what's going on out there today as well. The top 10, it's 7-3 calls over puts, which is also interesting because UVXY not usually a call heavy product. When it is, it's usually folks fading the hell out of that upside. That could indeed be what's going on out there today. But right now there are only 3 puts to 7 calls in the top 10. Those puts we have about 142,000 for number 7 of the SEP 11 puts. Then we got number 4, 162,000 of the AUG expiring today, 10 puts, and 178,000 for number 2 of the AUG also expiring today, 9 puts. Doesn't seem like those are going to make it. They were close. That's why I say, listeners, it's such a heartbreaking product because we were looking pretty good on those 9 puts until we weren't. And if past is prologue, those are opening buyers on those puts, but they're not selling the hell out of those. So, yeah, if you didn't close them, you missed your chance, looks like, listeners. Again, UVXY is one of the more heartbreaking products I've seen. It just moves on a whim right as these puts are going out, listeners, and it leaves wreckage in its wake. The number 1 position, by the way, right now in UVXY, listeners, 18,600 of the SEP 10. So also hanging out right at that strike right now. Intriguing stuff. In terms of what's going on out there today, listeners, let us find out. The big dog today are the SEP 9.5 puts, 32,300 of these. I said SEP, August. The August 9.5 puts going up 32,300 times. These are expiring today, obviously. So a lot of paper on these. These had a chance this morning. Right now, not sure. Probably a lot of back and forth, given the fact that we were blowing through that strike not too long ago. 31,000 for number 2 of the AUG 10 calls. So again, we are right at that strike, listeners. So 63,000 contracts right there. Just playing with fire, listeners. And then we go back to the August 9.5 calls. 29,000 of these going up as well. So yeah, throw those into the mix. You got nearly 100,000 contracts of folks really playing with some fire right now. The 9.5 and 10 strikes, pretty fluid in UVXY right now. 18,000 for number 4 of the AUG 10 puts. And then number 5 today for the most actives, we have the SEP 10 calls expiring on the 2nd, not the monthly. 10,000, actually 15,000 of these bad boys going up out there as well. So Mr. Meatball, a lot going up in the world of UVXY. Anything catching your eye out there this week, sir?
Yeah. It's definitely been busy and getting the moves you kind of expect out of UVXY when the market goes bananas.
The market is going bananas, at least somewhat right now. Mr. Matt, before we roll out of the ETPs, sir, I neglected to ask you earlier. Simon hinted for us. He hinted on the show last week that we may be getting options perhaps sooner than we might think. Any insights into the options for our listeners, sir?
Yeah, we definitely do plan to list options on SPKX and SPKY at some point. We don't have a firm date yet. Mainly what we're doing right now is letting the underlying shares establish themselves. And then when we get to the point where we feel like options make sense, we'll make them available for trading. So we'll keep this crowd updated as that progresses. But hopefully in the next few weeks or so, we should have options on SPKX and SPKY.
Next few weeks? Wow. Oh, that is sooner than we thought. Okay, great. So you share Simon's optimism then, sooner rather than later, Matt.
Yes, absolutely. And that would, and as we've discussed, a volatility product ecosystem consists of futures, options, ETPs, and options on ETPs. So we're 75% of the way there. One more piece of the puzzle.
There you go. One more piece of the puzzle indeed. Speaking of the vol puzzle, listeners, we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the earnings vol puzzle. Still a lot of earnings popping off. We are still in the middle of it, listeners. This week we had Zoom on Monday, obviously a very pandemic-associated name. Tuesday we had Macy's, Dick's, Medtronic, Intuit, and Nordstrom's. Wednesday, Petco, NVIDIA, Salesforce, Snowflake. Snowflake seemed like it was a forgotten IPO for a while. I know from a lot of our traders and listeners, a lot of you were hot on Snowflake early on just from an options trading perspective. Then you kind of moved on to other things. Well, it's back. It popped hard this week, listeners, as well as Box. Yesterday, we had Peloton, Dollar Tree, and Dollar General, so the dollar store day, Burlington, Marvell, Dell, and Gap. And we have all the updated reports for you available for free because we like you folks over there. TheOptionsInsider.com is the place to go. We did Snowflake and TD, all that fun stuff on the show yesterday for the option blocks. Go check out those. If you want the updated details for you, coming up next week, we have Five Below. They're pricing in, or they're trading at, I should say, 132 right now. $10.50 is what they're pricing. In the past, they moved $8.05. I wonder how much that will be influenced by what we saw in the rest of the dollar store space out there. Let's also really quickly, Lululemon coming up soon as well. They have the infamous sheer yoga pants fame. About $3.18 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $21.50, listeners. In the past, they've moved $17.20. So, man, that's a little bit of extra juice for yoga pants. What's the vol in yoga pants, listeners? Hit us up, let us know. In terms of the season, it's been a pretty robust season. Week 1, 97%. Week 2, 98%. Week 3, 114%. Week 4, the banger of the season, 136%. Week 5, 110%. Week 6, kind of slowing down a little bit, hanging out at 91% right now. That brings our season average right now to 112%. That is still pretty robust when you consider that the rolling moving average since the onset of the pandemic has been about 86%. What does that mean? Well, if it's 100% listeners, that means every name delivered exactly what they were pricing in from a straddle perspective. 86% obviously shows underperformance. Right now, we're at 112%. So this cycle so far is outperforming from an earnings vol perspective. So intriguing stuff. We added some new trades yesterday, some new long calendars in NetApp and Workday. And so get all those calendars. 92 long straddles we're monitoring for you right now. Easy for me to say. 92 long straddles and 64 long calendars for your trading information and education. TheOptionsInsider.com. Click on the Options News and Articles tab to begin your journey to the dark side of earnings vol. Meanwhile, it's time for us to go to the dark side of your questions. It is time for the Volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the Volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options. or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Vol voicemail, the portion of the show where you folks take the reins, your questions, your comments, your insights, your pearls of wisdom. Last week, we asked you a very vol-related question. We asked you, hey, VIX was back below 20, at least when we posted that at the beginning of last week. These days, obviously not so much. We said, is this the beginning of a new vol regime or just a blip on the radar? Quite simply, will VIX still be below 20 at the end of Q3? And 68.2% of you said no, you were fading that near-term vol fade. 17.3% said yes, and 14.5% said, you know what? Vol is just confusing. I'm with you. It is crazy out there these days, what we're seeing. I was surprised that number, quite frankly, wasn't higher. We threw that in there for a reason. This week's question of the week is an interesting one as well, asking you right now, in this period of uncertainty in the market, which options trades are you utilizing in your own portfolios? Don't see your choices, and of course, hit us up with your specific answers. We gave you 4 categories to choose from: short puts or put spreads, long calls or call spreads, ratio spreads or butterflies. Those are getting hot these days. And collars or risk reversals. Mr. Matt, we'll start with you. If you have a vote, have at it. And then more importantly, what do you think our audience is up to in this period of uncertainty? Which options trades are they utilizing in their portfolio, sir?
Yeah, I would say, given the response to last week's question, that 68% of your audience feels that we will be higher than come the end of the third quarter. I suspect they should be long calls, and so that's what I suspect the answer that you'll see the most of.
Interesting. Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. Remember, this is not just vol products. This is your broad portfolios. This could be your SPX or SPY or whatever you have out there in your portfolio. Mr. Meatball, what do you think our audience is up to? Short puts or put spreads, long calls or call spreads, ratio spreads or butterflies, or collars/risk reversals, sir?
I'm going to say they're... I'm going to say they're not doing collars and risk reversals. I'm going to say they're probably not doing flies. So let's go with the spreads. I'll bet you they're doing spreads.
Short put spreads or long call spreads? What are you going for?
I'm going short put spreads.
All right. You got a bit of a finger on the pulse of our audience, Mr. Meatball. 52.2% going for short put spreads right now, or short puts or put spreads.
Degenerate premium sellers.
There are some degenerate premium sellers in the audience. Yes. Also looking to obviously get into these markets at perhaps some lower levels. Can't fault them for that. Number 2, we have the long calls and call spreads. So the folks who are loading up to the upside, trying to catch the upside wave. A distant number 2, 21.7%. Then we get into some of the funkier stuff. The ratio spreads and flies, only 15.2% going out that direction. And bringing up the rear, I thought for sure this would get a little bit more love. That's why we put collars first to kind of draw the eye, listeners. It is an environment we might think about a collar, given the fact that we're selling off yet again. Collars and risk reversals only getting 10.9%. If you're listening live, you can probably still get in there. You got about 2 hours left on this one. It'll probably be done by the time the podcast goes live, listeners. Them's the breaks. You got to get in at options while the getting is good, listeners. Here's a silly question from John. John says, hey, guys, love the show. Just wondering, are you guys now fans of the VIX streaming service? Well, he's, of course, referring to, listeners, the Spanish language streaming service that has launched called, weirdly enough, VIX, and is housed out of Vix.com. I mentioned that on the show a few months back. I was driving through downtown Chicago, and I saw a billboard for VIX. And I thought, I saw it from a distance. I thought, that's interesting. SIBO advertising VIX to the general public. Okay. And then I got closer. I saw the branding was orange and it looked different. It had a small child on it. I thought, are they changing up all the branding for VIX? Are they aiming at children? What is this? And I got even closer to the billboard and I realized, oh no, this is a Spanish language streaming service. So John, no, my fluency level in Spanish is not good. If it was an Italian, I'd be better suited to watch it. Spanish, not so much. So alas, I have not watched the new VIX streaming service. Mr. Meatball and Mr. Matt, have either of you binged hours of the new Vix.com Spanish language streaming service?
No, you know what? I actually set up a different VIX. It's VVIX.com, and it just streams the VIX pit all day.
Oh, that's scintillating content. I would pay money for that.
Really, it's really just amazing. There's nothing like seeing, we'll say, brokers hanging out doing nothing, and then one order every couple of hours, and then all at once it'll be exciting for a couple of minutes. If I can, the wrap up show at the end of the week is something you can't miss.
Killer. Grown men standing around, adjusting themselves, scratching their butts, clearing their throats. It's scintillating content. All right. Yeah. So none of us can speak, unfortunately, John, to the quality or lack thereof from Vix.com. I don't think any of us have consumed it. Let's get back to YouTube. Scott Somer, he was the one chiming in earlier saying Webull announcing they are supporting Spike's options. So he's a fan of that. He also wants to know if UVXY is expecting a reverse split anytime soon. I have not heard anything more about that. I think today's action puts that down the road a little bit. Mr. Meatball, have you heard anything more about the much anticipated reverse split of UVXY, sir?
It was getting close there for a minute. Normally they start really digging in around $7 a share, because they're afraid something like today can happen and it runs back higher. So UVXY is back above 10. It ain't going to reverse split while it's above 10. When it gets down to the 7s, then you can expect something like that to happen.
Yeah, the whims of the market are kind of doing the reverse split for them right now, Scott. So, yeah, as long as it's hanging out north of that 10 handle, I would not expect it to happen. South of the 10 handle, all bets are off. And certainly when it gets to the 7 range that the Meatball is talking about, then we're definitely due. But not quite yet, listeners. As we head on into our final segment, it is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crystal ball. Welcome to the crystal ball. The most difficult, the most dangerous, also most difficult portion of the show to say. This is the portion of the show where we attempt to wrestle with those vol gods, pin them down for another week, see what they have in store for us. Both of our vol friends, Spikes and Vix, hanging out a little bit north of where they were at the start of the show. Both of them are at about a 24 even when we kicked off the show. Spike's at about a 24.16 right now, and VIX at about a 24.11 right now. So that means none of us are a winner this week. Mr. Meatball and his palindromic 2002 definitely out of the running. I was feeling a little bit more vol. Remember, we were flirting with that 20 handle again, listeners. I was feeling 21.75. Not enough vol, listeners. Even Simon. Simon was feeling the most vol of all of us last week. He was feeling a 23. We were all speculating if that was perhaps a bridge too far. Turned out that was not a bridge far enough because he was over a point away as well. So even the highest of our estimates this week did not get high enough to encapsulate the full surge, the full power of the vol space this week. Looking at some listeners here really quickly. Everybody had looks like a low 20 handle. The highest I see here looks like of the ones that the producer surfaced to me. Oh, no, we have some 22 halves. Todd had a 23.1. It's not going to do it, but it's closer. It's closer than the rest of us. So it looks like no listener winners this week. No host winners this week as well. That means, Mr. Matt, you haven't joined us in a while. You get the dubious honor of going first, sir. What are you feeling this time next week from the Spikes land, sir?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my comments at the beginning of the show where I was talking about mean reversion from, both above the mean and below the mean. So the mean of the Spikes index for 2022 is about 26. I think we're going to continue to trend towards that mean. So I'm going to call it 25.10, 25 spot 10.
A little bit more juice on the screen, according to Matt. 25.10, he said. Then I was the next closest in air quotes because I wasn't very close, listeners. So I guess I will go next. That actually gives a nice advantage to the Meatball. He gets to go last. So I'm rewarding him for being the least accurate, but that's the nice kind of guy that I am. I'm also thinking we're going to be juicier this time next week. Again, that's kind of the way I've been for a little bit here. This vol fade, I wasn't quite feeling it. And when we dipped below 20, I definitely wasn't feeling it. 24.11, I said we were hanging out in Spikes or VIX, 24.16 or so in Spikes. Yeah, I don't hate where you're hanging out, Matt. I don't hate it. I'm going to give you a little bit of breathing room, though, so I'm going to come a little bit away from you. I'm going to say not that far from where we are right now, but north of it, 24.65. So about a half a point north of where we are right now in the Spikes lane. All right, Mr. Meatball, it's a pretty tight market. You're going to go inside of it? You're going to go above it? You're going to try to squeeze the downside again?
All right. So you guys are both thinking a little lower, huh?
No, higher. Both higher.
Oh, okay. Well, then I got to go lower. I'm going to go with the palindrome and the repeater at 22.22.
22.22. Once again, going for the Ducks. Your Rock Lobster tried that about a month ago. Didn't work out. You tried it a few weeks ago. I don't think it quite got there. Will the third time be the charm for Ducks, listeners? That's our market right now. 22.22 to the dark side for the Meatball. The most accurate, the leader in the Bullseyes game right now, 24.65 for myself. And Matt coming out at 25.10. I don't hate that level either. Got some listener suggestions coming in. They're feeling a little bit less vol, 22.44. I'm seeing some other lower handles in here. So where are you feeling next week, listeners? Get your guess in before the end of the day today when you listen into the podcast, and you will be entered into our prize drawing. You win some fabulous prizes. Cost you nothing. You have some fun. It's a good time for all. Unfortunately, listeners, that music means the good times have come to an end, at least for this program. And unfortunately for all of you on the on-demand side, that is the end of your good times for the week. I want to thank all of you for joining us here this week. Of course, all you pro folks, hang out. We'll be back in a little bit to break down the weird, the wild, the wonderful world of unusual activity on Options Oddities. Also, maybe we'll do some live trading. We'll see if we can leg out of those 1x2 put spreads. I've already taken some parts of it off. I know the Rock Lobster has as well. We'll see what's left to take off and gap a little bit later today, and a whole bunch of other fun. If you want to check that out for yourselves, listeners, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. Let's go around the horn again. Mr. Matt, if folks want to learn more about all things Spikes, including the new ETPs, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, for all things Spikes, MIAXoptions.com /Spikes. For the new ETPs, convexity shares, convexityshares.com. So all the information you need on the entire SPKEX ecosystem are available on those sites.
There you go. ConvexityShares.com for the ETPs. You know where to go to learn all things SPKEX. MIAXoptions.com/SPKEX is the place to go. You know, Matt, Simon was hinting recently about a new coat of paint coming to the MIAXoptions.com/SPKEX site. Any updates on those for us, sir?
Yeah, that's true. It is in the works. It's going to look fantastic. I don't have a launch date on that for you yet, but hopefully in the very near future.
It is cool stuff. Of course, while you're there, listeners, you can also check out the Shift Search stuff and even our buddy Mr. Nick and Quick Strike, the tools that we use all the time on Twifo, also available there for equities. How cool is that? MIAXoptions.com/SPKEX is the place to go for all that cool stuff while we're all waiting for the new updated look over there. And Mr. Meatball, you always have a new updated look. What's cooking in the land of the pit these days, sir?
We just read my blog every day. VIX, go to the optionpit.com and read the VIX Edge, and you will be a better trader for it. Yesterday, what I said was ahead of the Fed, buy September puts in VIX and buy a September put spread. It would be extremely profitable if you'd done so. So you should be reading it every day.
Check it out. Optionpit.com is the place to go. We have to get on out of here. Like I said, for all you on-demand folks, that will conclude your broadcast week. For all you pro folks, hang out. We'll be back in a little bit. And then, of course, back again all throughout next week to another Friday, another episode of Volatility Views. Stay safe out there, everybody.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you SPKEX Volatility products. SPKEX options and futures are traded on the SPKEX Volatility Index, SPKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about SPKEX at MIAXoptions.com/SPKEX. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.